In the midst of all that is transpiring in our community in this season, we need to reflect on how God has hardwired a sense of compassionate justice into the fabric of each of us. That allows us to embrace any who are being victimized or suffering in our midst, and to be moved to act for justice on their behalf. We're guided in how to act for justice and how to respond in compassionate justice by key verses we find throughout Scripture, such as in Proverbs chapter 31, verse 8, which says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. Ensure justice for those being crushed." And when we see the unjust things being done to others due to racism or any sort of improper use of power or position for oppression, we want to respond. Indeed, as followers of Jesus, we are called to respond. Psalms 103, verse 6 says it this way: "The Lord works righteousness and justice for all the oppressed." And Psalms 106, verse 3 says, "Blessed are those who act justly, who always do what is right." So God works righteousness and justice when we engage in doing what is right, because our God is a God of action. And when we act with compassionate justice, not just think about it, but act in it, we see God do incredible things in us and through us. But to do so means that we have to become willing to live with our eyes wide open to see people who are suffering under injustice. And we must be compassionate enough to stop to care and to stand with, using every bit of our influence and power to bring about change for those that are suffering under injustice as we stay connected to them in their suffering and in their pursuit of justice. This picture of compassionate justice is painted so vividly for us by Jesus as he tells the story of the Good Samaritan in Luke chapter 10, verses 30 through 37. When a man asked him to clarify what it means to love your neighbor, Jesus replied with this story. A Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, and they left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw the man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but then he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. And then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn where he took care of him. And the next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man, and if this bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm there." Now Jesus asked, "Which of these 3 would you say was a neighbor to the man who was attacked by the bandits?" And the man replied, "The one who showed him mercy." And then Jesus said, "Yes, now go and do the same." So Jesus is teaching us through this story about how God would have us to live out compassionate justice by encouraging us first to slow down and see people, not pass by on the other side of the road, but that we would see people like the Samaritan saw the victim on the road. We can't be so caught up in our own lives that we only look at ourselves. We can't be so busy that we only look at what we're doing next. And we can't allow ourselves to be blinded to the injustice suffered by others around us just because we were not born into that unjust plight ourselves. Don't miss the opportunity to see people who are suffering. When you don't, you both lose. When we close our eyes to the suffering of the people around us, our heart gets a little harder and we become a little more selfish and we lose. We need to ask God to give us the freedom to live in such a way that we have a compassionate heart and an open agenda in order to see people who are suffering around us, to see people we know and people we don't know who are suffering under injustice. And we need to have God's eyes to be able to see those people. And then the second lesson Jesus teaches us through this story is that we would not only see them, but that we would stop to care. That we would stop to care for people who are suffering, the marginalized, the mistreated, like the Samaritan did when he saw the victim on the road. Using whatever we have in our hands at the moment to address their need, that we would see people who are suffering under injustice isn't enough. We have to be moved to act on their behalf. We have to have the courage to stop to care, to stand with them, to stand for them, and to use whatever we have, whatever power, whatever influence we have to help restore the justice. We are wired to care. We feel better about ourselves when we stop to care. And in doing so, we experience God, the God of justice, in a new and powerful way. The third lesson that Jesus teaches us through this story is that we would stay connected. That we would stay connected whenever possible, doing all that we can to the best of our ability, again, using all of our influence and power to bring about change to help people recover from injustice. Standing with people is one of the most powerful things we have to offer, because the relationships we develop with the people who are suffering is the vehicle that allows them to receive God's love poured out through us. So today we each have opportunities to act with compassionate justice. We can take Jesus' model to heart and see God do incredible things in us and through us by acting with compassionate justice and living out what we say we believe in our scriptures. Isaiah 56, chapter 56, verse 1, urges us, "This is what the Lord says, maintain justice and do what is right, for my salvation is close at hand and my righteousness will soon be revealed." And God promises to sustain us through any challenges we face while acting in compassionate justice. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 20, we read, "A bruised reed he will not break, and a smoldering wick he will not snuff out, till he has brought justice through to victory." If we're willing to live with eyes open to see people who are suffering under injustice, to be courageous enough to stop to care and stand with them, and to stay connected using our influence and power to bring about justice, we will fulfill our calling as Christ followers, and we will point people to Jesus so that they can learn to love God with all their heart, soul, strength, and mind, and love their neighbor as themselves.